Hello, how's everybody doing? I hope everyone's having a good day. So we're gonna begin today video talking about we're gonna go later on into it, but basically this line to talk about how working with Liberia and getting it straight will help us get straight. So I'm gonna let 2 to 3 minutes, probably at max 4 to 5 minutes, because I want to give everybody a chance to get in. So I will come back to you guys in about 4 to 5 minutes to let everyone have a chance to get in. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Okay, it's been 4 minutes. As the live keeps going, for those members who are members, you can hop on anytime. So today's topic is going to be getting Liberia straight will get us straight. Now, the reason why I chose this topic is I find it very important. The power of narratives, the power of generalization, and the power of the current situation we're in. And of course, if you haven't heard the news, there was a shooting in Buffalo in a predominantly black grocery store in a predominantly black neighborhood. And this has happened numerous times before against the black community. Of course, you remember Dylan Roof uh, doing it at Mother Emanuel AME Church, one of the oldest churches in black churches in America, back in 2015. I still remember that very well when that happened. And so now we have the situation going on in Buffalo, New York. And all of this is an example of if we had Liberia straight, if we were focused on Liberia, we would have to worry about that. But part of that comes from narratives. And narratives are a lot. Narratives speak everything. I've always said that narratives, generalizations, all of that, all of that plays a huge factor. And so the reason why I wanted to talk about that and the reason why I burst out of narrative was because, again, you go on, I know Twitter is not the place to be. I know Twitter, but it's Twitter. You go up on Google and you'll hear the same narratives about Liberia over and over and over again. So when these narratives are constantly being displaced, they're constantly being said, they're constantly being talked about, it creates a situation where reality gets distorted because that's the power of a narrative, that's the power of generalization, that's the power of propaganda, is you're able to distort an image. So when we look at the case of Liberia, when you constantly hear the Liberia African Americans, and they you always use it in a bad connotation. Liberia and African Americans are almost never used in good context. They're always used in a negative context, negative connotation. And so as a result, you have a lot of African Americans, some African Americans who would be inclined to want to go to Africa are reluctant because they constantly keep bringing up Liberia. And that happened via TikTok. So um, there was a situation where, again, I saw somebody on TikTok say, well, it didn't work in Liberia. And I've talked about this over and over again since I've been on this channel. I've talked about how the U.S. played an instrumental role in destabilizing Liberia. So people just need to be aware of that. And how Liberia was never really truly able to grow. It was never truly able to succeed. It was never truly able to become on its own. So when all of that is not taken into consideration, the Liberia never having a chance to truly reach its potential, and the U.S. government destroying Liberia, it gives the view that African Americans can't govern themselves, that African Americans are not African, and that African Americans are nothing more than westernized black people. Even though we've seen historically there have been plenty of westernized Africans who were born in the continent that thought very similar to African Americans, such as the Zulus in South Africa, West Africans that were studied at British universities or other universities throughout Europe. It wasn't just exclusively African Americans. But when you have that narrative that African Americans suppressed the indigenous Liberians, African Americans brought a white man's mentality, replication of colonialism, settler colonialism, even though Liberia's history has nothing to do with settler colonialism. Settler colonialism is a specific type of colonialism when it's displacing indigenous populations, and many African Americans are descendants of West and Central Africans. 360,000 went about 300,000, 360,000 left from Liberia and about and the Windward Coast. So Liberia, Sierra Leone, Ivory Coast. Liberia was the bulk of that. Um, well, I'll say Sierra Leone. So Sierra Leone and Liberia were just as I'll say about the same. Um, but and also 95% of the population is indigenous, and many of the indigenous population were married to each other. Were married to each other, and were married to African Americans. And you know, I got into a Twitter beef with somebody again who said that African Americans instituted slavery in Liberia, even though that did not happen. I've made numerous videos debunking that. I shared evidence. I debunked his evidence when he said, "Oh, well, is this not a good enough source?" Where you're talking about Charles D.B. King. Well, Charles D.B. King was, I would say, the worst leader in Liberia. Well, I'd say the second worst outside of Samuel Doe. But top, yeah, no, I'll put him top three. Top three worst are Samuel Doe, Charles Taylor, and I put Charles D.B. King along with that. And then William B. S. Tubman I put there too because I don't like the fact that he allowed the U.S. all that presence in Africa. But beside the point, yeah, Charles D.B. King was one of the worst Liberian leaders ever. He had the most fraudulent election in 1927. I mean, there was only like 15,000 registered voters, and this man claimed to have gotten like 245,000 votes. So, dude was a fraudulent man. So, it doesn't surprise me that he would engage in that type of behavior. Mhm. So, when you have that situation, when you have people like that who are engaging in fraudulent behavior, it just it that narrative gets thrown out the window. And so when that happened, then this man's gonna make the claim that, oh well, when I said African Americans, American Liberians intermarried with the indigenous population, he said, yeah, of course they would, implying basically that they were, assaulting those indigenous population, even though it was consensual and many of them were leaders of their own kingdoms and societies and had their own places in society. But when you have these kind of narratives, when you have the narrative is based on this, it gives African Americans, it doesn't give African Americans a way out because it implies and it sends the message that, well, we're not going to be something in America, but we're not going to be something in Africa because Africans think we're just westernized Africans, that we don't have our own culture, we don't have our own mind. And so it puts us in a situation that it's like that phrase, damn if you do, damn if you don't. I mean, that's essentially what it is. But what's good? What's good? We got a special guest on here. What's good? You anything you want to say? Oh,
No, man, I'm just listening in. I'm just checking in and seeing what's up. I
oh
agree with
no.
you 100%.
Yeah, yeah, it's good. It's good to have you on. Yeah, it was just to stop and getting our beer straight. We'll get us straight. We're just having a conversation, having the dialogue, and basically understanding how narratives and generalizations um have caused us downfall. And once we get those narratives and generalizations straight, it will get us straight. And so that's basically what we're talking about. If you have any thoughts and opinions, feel free to speak on it.
I agree 100% with you as far as correcting the narratives of the past and really straighten out the history so that we can move forward and uh I guess have that energy to really pursue Liberia as a focus going forward. But I think that I feel a good way to correct the history as well, or a good answer for individuals who I guess attack falsely our history in Liberia is to create a new, I guess, history, I guess, or a new outreach or a current engagement with Liberia to where we can show that we're not just what happened in the 1800s or the 1900s. or the 20th century, where we're doing things now. And if you want to focus on the past forever, that's one thing you can do, even though a lot of the times how they paint the past is wrong. But if you want to focus on the past for forever, that's something you can do. It's probably not the most productive thing we could do if we want to chart a new future based on what we understand now, what we've gotten, what we've learned from the past, and how we can adjust to have a better uh, progressive engagement with a continent that we belong to, via Liberia, then that's a whole nother question. If we could show, or a whole nother subject, and if we could show examples of us actually going out there and making positive impacts on the landscape, I think that'll just shut down all this, falsehood that's coming out with regards to our history. Um, yeah, that's a lot of my focus is how do we do things now? How do we change what the situation, the conditions on the ground are now, so that others can't continually try to box us into the history, and try to, because I mean, we could try to correct the history, but people are going to want to believe what they want to believe about the past, you know, based on their particular ideological disposition. Um, you can't argue with facts on the ground today. That's things are the way they are in the world as they are now, and that's not something you can, spin. I mean, you can try to spin it, but if we if we went back and we really got the economy humming again, really created a political environment where black people are safe, black investment is safe. We're building infrastructure. We're doing things. That's not something you can really spend too much. That's not something you can, because I mean, it either is or it isn't. It either is something positive or it's not. So I think that should be a big part of our focus. It should be, I love what you do, Jabari, as far as decrying the myths and really replacing it with truth. I feel like that should be like definitely half of what we do, but the other half should be spent on how do we re-engage? How do we actually re-engage practically, as far as going out there and actually fixing things and making Liberia a valid option for Black Americans who live in the U.S. or in the West, or anywhere. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on the whole subject.
Yeah, and yeah, my whole thing is I've always been more of a forward thinker. I think that the reason why it's so hard to separate from the past is because what Ghana literally uses this past to attract tourism. It's really it's an example of a contradiction and a cognitive dissonance
Mhm.
for many of our people. So Ghana is literally profiting off of slave dungeons that your ancestors literally were stuffed into, never
Mhm.
to see their continent again. But y'all go to Ghana and is having a blast at the Elmina Castle that your ancestors again literally got shipped off from.
Right.
And y'all don't have that same backlash with Ghana or Ivory Coast or Nigeria and say, no, I'm sorry, but you don't get to tell us that, oh, what African Americans did in Liberia was wrong, but you're literally telling us, you're literally doing tours on castles in which our ancestors were sold from. That, mind you, you brought them over. It's not like these Africans got kidnapped by Europeans randomly or they got kidnapped uh, by Europeans and just the Ghanaians just didn't have no power. No, many of them had agreements. They
For
waged
sure.
war with each other, but yet and still, Ghana gets the profit off of its history. But
Mhm.
yet, when it comes to Liberia, everybody has this complete 180, and
Mhm.
everybody wants to say, well, Liberia needs to completely forget about its thing. I'm just like, why don't y'all do that with Ghana?
Mhm.
Why should Ghana be allowed to host its Elmina castle, let you go on slave dungeons and all of that, when your ancestors literally went through that and were subjected to some of the horrible treatment prior to when the voyage happens. So that's why I understand where you're coming from, but it's really hard to sort of distance yourself from the past when people such as Ghana are using their past
Right.
to be that kind of person, to be uh, um are able to do that. That's my thing. Like I don't like that.
No, no, no. I totally no, and I totally, and I don't want to
And
make
I
it
and
seem
I
good.
and I want to read somebody's comment. He said, "I don't like that Ghana does that slave tourism thing. It never felt right to me." Exactly. It's really bothersome that
Yeah,
you're going to a slave castle to which your ancestors are going through, and I understand it's painful, right? But at the same time, they're literally making awful money off of that.
right.
And mind you, they ain't giving you citizenship yet. They may have given you the right of abode and may have done like a year of return, but Ghana ain't giving you full citizenship and stuff like that. So to me, that would be my whole thing when it comes to talking about Liberian history.
No, I totally I totally get it, and I definitely think that that's definitely we should be attacking on multiple fronts. And history is super important, and we gotta rectify our the view of our history. I totally 100% agree. As far as what Ghana is doing with their history, with their tourism, I would love to see Liberia be a country where people visit to see state of the art factories. You know what I mean? Or they visit because they want to see. Uh, Liberia has some of the most pristine beaches in West Africa. If we had a tourism sector geared towards that, or like I see where those guys, I mean, the Ghana and other countries are, I guess, exploiting their history with slavery as a draw. But I think that's hollow. There's only so many times that you'd want to go and see something like that. I think we have the opportunity to chart our own our own engagement with the West, our own engagement with the descendants of slavery and so forth. That's a lot more positive. That's a lot more forward looking or future looking. But I totally understand what you're saying as far as, and I don't want to come off as if I'm saying let's
Oh
stop.
no, 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 you're not at all.
Yeah, 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 for sure. Like I would love to see, we build really major cities on that coast, and that be the draw. That be the draw rather than going to see a slave dungeon. You're moving into a very dynamic city that's black, that has state of the art infrastructure, that has high speed rail. That's how I see like our opportunity to draw in, you know, uh, I guess engagement with Black Americans, people who could go there. And because I feel like my the way I look at it, I feel like Black Americans only stay in America because of the economy. If the economy wasn't what it was, I don't think there'd be any incentive to stay here. And even that is not the best for us. So it's like if we could create an alternative where you can live in a Black republic, you can live in a society where you're a full member, where there's no glass ceilings in anything, where there's no the race concept of race as far as within that specific society just isn't applicable the way it is here. Um, to where you can still have a decent living and make a decent future for yourself and your progeny, that would, I don't think there's anything like if we could create an actual alternative there, or an actual option. I think there's so many Black Americans that would choose that because I feel like the only reason we're staying here is because we've got certain guarantees here as far as economically. You have certain at least safety nets here that you don't exactly have in Liberia currently, or in West Africa anywhere currently. Um, I think that's the only thing holding us here when we can actually state that no, you can come here and you can get a job, you can make decent money over here, and you can participate in the society from day one. we'll definitely get a lot more people engaging um, with a place like Liberia over just the hollow tour. I feel like a lot of our tourism period is very hollow in how we do it. But yeah, I just feel like we've also got to really try to focus on building something new so that we could attract people who are maybe on the fences or just don't know that there's an opportunity out there for them to make decisions. Because I mean you can't beat that. If you can have there's no developed black majority country in the world to this day. If we could create the first one on the continent, and I think that'd be a clear choice, a serious choice that would be considered by black people in this hemisphere.
Hmm. And yeah, and that's the thing. I can tell people I don't like to. I'm not a person who gets so hamp down on history. Like I said, I do history because history inspires me, but I'm
Okay.
not the kind of person who's hamp down on history because I understand like, yeah, it's like similar to the kings and queens. Yeah, we were kings and queens. Like, yeah, we were. We're not now. Like it's a different era. It's
Uh-huh.
2022. What we're doing right now is where we don't have a lot of healthcare system.
Mhm.
Infrastructure is not there yet. So I do want to focus on that. And yes, I think it's really important that you provide those opportunities because once you provide that opportunity, yeah, people will start to come because now they'll have an incentive, now they'll have somewhere they want to be at. but
Yeah.
and but the only thing I'll say about the history part is it matters slightly because it's a sense that now it gives people even more motivation or it gives people a more of a legacy because it's similar to like when you join any organization. Um. Oh. Holla. LD. That's LD. Um. That's him. So yeah, yeah, it is that when you look at it, think about any organization you join, any major organization. One of the things that people will bring up is legacy,
Mhm.
like from our legacy of this. For example, I would say, uh, think of the Divine Nine. Whenever people join, they're joining a legacy.
Right.
They're joining a sense of I'm continuing the legacy of what my founders started, and
Right.
so that's why to me it's so important to get that narrative right because now
Absolutely.
when African Americans go and say, yeah, I got health care, I got access to this, and I'm continuing the legacy and the
Absolutely.
leg and all the ancestors, the leaders that I admire are what wanted to be here. Now it's even more motivation because now, okay, yeah, the healthcare is great, but I could go get healthcare. I could go work in South Africa if I wanted to, or I could work in Ghana if I wanted to, or could work in Burkina Faso. But I chose to work in Liberia because I the healthcare is good. The healthcare opportunities are great, but also the fact that I wanted to continue the legacy that this means
Mhm.
something. So that I would just add that saying that it would
No,
only matter just slightly. It's not
no,
everything
no,
because you
no,
could
it's
talk about
huge.
history. Yeah,
I'd
yeah.
say no, I'd say it matters. It's not even a slight, it's a huge factor. It's a huge factor. I just want to marry those two points. We definitely want to correct the mistellings of our history, and we also want to forge a new path to show that there is opportunity here. There's huge, like whenever I'm talking to someone about Liberia and I mention Liberia, I'm always talking about the fact that, look, anything you want to do here in America that you believe that you'd be stymied because of racial situations, or you might not get funding, or you might not, anywhere you want to go in any industry, it's wide open in Liberia. It's wide open. This is a nation with so much upside. Upside is ridiculous. This is a country the size of Virginia. I think Virginia makes 500 billion annually in GDP.
But
Liberia
that
is
they
at
have a
2.5.
population about the same size. They have a
They have,
population about
they have a population about the same size. Liberia, and Virginia's, and I'm from Virginia, so Virginia is very rather underpopulated. Most of America is underpopulated.
Yeah,
There's only a
it's
few.
just empty land. It's just empty land. Like most,
Exactly.
it's really
Right.
rural areas. Most people live in New York, LA,
Exactly.
Chicago. Most,
Exactly.
yeah.
A state like Virginia can support at least 20 million people, and there's only 8 here.
I would go
And
farther. I would say
yes, further than that.
Liberia is smaller than South Korea.
Right. Right. So look
No,
at
sorry, my bad. Liberia is bigger than South Korea. South
bigger than
Korea is
South
smaller
Korea.
than
And
Liberia is bigger than South Korea, and yet South Korea has a
like
population of
50
like
million.
50 million.
50 million, exactly. And Israel, sorry, Haiti is the size of Israel and it's got 10 million people there. You know what I mean? So like there's so much room for growth. But Virginia, I always bring up to people, I'm like, yo, like there's 500 billion GDP in Virginia, and Virginia has nothing near the natural resources that Liberia has, right?
Mhm.
There's 8 million people here. Liberia has about 5 or so million people, and the GDP is 2.9 billion. The upside there is ridiculous. If we had the level of if we had human resources, if we had a capital infusion, you can easily scale up. I'm talking, and it's not here in America. If you're trying to be a billionaire, if you're trying to really be successful, you've really got to be in a highly technical profession. You know what I mean? Tech. Um, Either you got to be part of a legacy where you're not going to be a millionaire in America from sugar production anymore. You know what I mean? They're
Oh no.
doing that. They're doing that in Nigeria. Nigeria, the richest black person in Africa, made his billions off sugar and cement refinery. That's such a rudimentary industry, but because there's virtually no competition there, because very few people have all the I guess the factors, or is able to galvanize all the factors necessary to compete in those spaces. You really have a wide open landscape where you can really go in and chart a new future. And I feel like that lights people's eyes up more than anything. Like, well, that there's pushback because they don't believe that kind of opportunity is there. But when you show them the facts that there should be that opportunity out there, if we would only go out and seek and seize it, I guess, that really piques people interest. History is important too, and then you tie that history aspect into it to be like, like we wouldn't be the first to do this. There's plenty of Black Americans that have went before us that charted. We'd be ratifying their sacrifice by doing this. I feel it's got to be a two-pronged approach, as far as
Mhm.
charting, of course, and showing people hope, showing people the ability to solve, not just from a because most people, they're not patriotic. A lot of people, or they may be patriotic, but that's secondary to their own personal um,
Yeah, interest.
interest, right? So if you tie it in with their own personal interest, like you want to be, I don't know what people, you want to be in real estate. This is a beautiful place to do it. Like if you want to really go in on the ground and corner a market and build something from scratch that you can profit from, and that your children's children can, benefit from your industrial tenacity. That's a beautiful place to do it as a Black person. You've got the laws that are in your favor. You've got a government that needs the foreign direct investment that'll work with you. America doesn't care about us here and our investment. They've got their darlings, the Walmarts, the Pfizers, the large companies of the world, of American, I guess, of American industry, and that's who they're preferencing. They don't care about Black investment like that, but our investment there will go a lot further, and we'd have a government that's a partner trying to facilitate that growth of their industries. I just think when you sell it like that, that's a beautiful sell, especially to a lot of people who are less, I guess, uh patriotic, and more about what they get out of, um eh, you know uh taking those risks. um, but yeah, I totally agree. No, no, history is definitely half the battle, I believe. And the other half is showing people that they've got a future if they take that leap, or if they try to build in this direction.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you hit that like button. We need as many likes. Come on, let's get more viewers in. I know it was last minute, but I was very busy last week. But now since I'm done with things, I'll have a lot more free time and I'll be able to do a lot more videos, and so we can get more engagement. But to piggyback on your point about the American side, we talk about that constantly, like, in the case of you trying to do stuff, we always got this "we can do it right here" mentality, or we can, like, fight and we can become successful. And you brought up the point about darlings, because that's really the absolute truth. Like I said, you think you're gonna be the next Walmart in Walmart's territory that you don't
Never.
run. You think you're gonna be able to compete against ExxonMobil and Shell, which
Absolutely.
I don't believe in using fossil fuels. They're more renewable. You think
Yeah.
you're going to be able to compete against Pfizer, and then won't even allow a global vaccine to be
Right.
patented for everyone to manufacture? What makes you think you're going to compete against them in America that they have substantial influence in? They have tags. I'm just wondering, how is that going to work? Like, can
Absolutely.
anybody explain to me how that would work? Would it involve us having to use magic? Will we have to do alchemy? Does Harry Potter needs to come and let his wizard school us on magic? What is it going to be?
Yeah. No, a lot of, and if even if you look at the traditional spaces that Black entrepreneurship generally inhabits in America, it's light industry, it's it's service based,
Thank you.
it's really low, it's not at the higher
It's not.
levels
I
of
always say this:
development.
Black
Right.
entrepreneurship is oftentimes a single proprietary, or they have a few
Absolutely.
employees. It's, as like you said, it's not in strategic industries. What I
Right.
mean, I'm not saying that Black businesses don't matter,
No,
but
they
we don't
definitely
have, major Black mining companies or Black
absolutely.
telecommunication. It's like
Right.
when people compare Nigeria's billionaires and Black America's billionaires. Some Black
Right.
Americans say, "Well, we have more billionaires, right?" And my response is, Nigeria's two billionaires are worth more than all of Black America's billionaires combined.
Right.
Because the difference between Nigeria's billionaires
Mhm.
and or Nigeria, South Africa, Zimbabwe's billionaires,
Mhm.
and their and also down to their millionaires, is their millionaires are in key industries. They're
Right.
making billions from sugar, cement, construction,
Mhm.
gold, mining, telecommunication. In the case one time when it was a Black female billionaire, Foloronjo, I think she pronounced it Foloronjo Adekija, she was doing oil. It's
Right.
strategic. It's stuff that actually matters, stuff that you use in everyday life, stuff that I can physically touch. It's
Right.
good to be, it's good to have, billionaires in the entertainment industry, but they're making their money solely off of brand,
Right.
solely off of their image. They're not making money off of key industries that actually are strategic to a nation. Show me a Black billionaire that's a billionaire in artificial intelligence and nanotechnology.
Right.
Show me a Black billion-dollar company that's off of metallic and non-metallic manufacturing. Show
Right.
me a Black billion-dollar company that's based off of quantum mechanics and quantum physics.
Right.
Where they're not there.
Nope.
And we do this every day. You do it well, which people may not know. For those, can you just explain what industry you're in, what you do, so people can understand, like, what, like, this is, we go in industries where most of the people don't look like us.
Right. Um, so for me, I work, I mean, I have a law background and I work for the state, and I'm a regulator in for specific professions in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Um, Contractors, architects, real estate agents, and so forth. Um, and yeah, like it's exactly like you stated. A lot of the time, Black entrepreneurship, it's really not even production related. A lot of the times, we're just
Yeah,
middlemen. A lot of the
yeah,
time, we're buying things that other people produced, and marking it up, and then I mean, it's really retail. It's very small. A lot of the time, in order for us to scale up, we have to partner with larger,
Yep.
predominantly white firms. Like, look, if you look at all the billionaires that we have, well, most of the billionaires we have, not only are they just entertainment, but they have to partner in order to get the infrastructure necessary to scale up their business to where it's, it can reach billionaire status and so forth. They have to partner with the Nikes of the world, the Adidas of the world, um, large alcohol uh, distilling
Yeah.
companies and so forth. Um, even with I think is his name Robert Smith? Is that
Yeah.
the yeah, like his was he's made his money off investing. So it's I mean, um,
And
it's
he was
not,
the found, and let's not forget he was the founder of BET, and he sold it, his BET.
that's
So that's
Bob
part of the.
Johnson. Wait, that's Bob Johnson. What's the other
Oh,
one? The other one that
okay, that's Bob Johnson. Robert Smith. Hold on, I think Robert Smith was. Hold on, wait, let me see, because
yeah, I'm not sure exactly what Robert Smith was in. I don't even know if I'm getting his name right, but yeah, it's just I feel like we would have if we had
oh yeah, right. Oh yeah, Robert Smith. Yeah, yeah, he's the investor. He's a of a private equity firm.
right,
Visa.
right.
Like yeah, yeah, you're right. He's an investor. Yeah.
Right. So and a lot of that is proximity to whiteness. You have to be able to be palatable to the dominant culture in order to get what it is that you want to get off. And also you can't ruffle the feathers of you can't completely advocate in your people's interest if it's going to ruffle the feathers of your partners, which are generally from the dominant demographic. I feel like a lot of it is us begging for crumbs, whereas if we were in in Liberia, in a place where we literally can control all the factors for you vertically integrate everything, we wouldn't have to code switch as much. We can totally act within our own interest because we have sovereignty in this particular area. Um, and even if we did choose to we did choose to collaborate with companies, it would be from a more definitely from a more equal negotiating back, no situation. Because you know, a lot of foreign companies can't compete with the Exxons of the world. A lot of foreign countries can't compete with the Pfizers of the world. But they can. China does this thing where, in order to gain access to the Chinese market, you have to partner with a Chinese firm. So if you're Tesla and you're trying to, sell your cars in China, you have to partner with another EV company that's Chinese, and there's technological transfers going on there. Um, and that's really why they do it. It's because they're trying to get Western technology. We could do a similar thing in Liberia, where if you want to access our market, if you want to, sell your goods here and be able to manufacture and produce your goods here, you have to partner with a Liberian firm, or you have to create a subsidiary that hires everybody locally from Liberia or produces locally in Liberia. There's just so much things that we could do to really, have more leverage in the game. I feel like if we're playing from here, we have to play by their rules. If we're playing from Liberia, we can definitely create our own rules, and we can, get a lot more out of the deal than just the crumbs that the dominant society here allows us to have to subsist, because it's really just subsisting. Whereas a community, Black Americans here in America are the consumer class. A lot of the time they talk about our buying power and how large it is, but as soon as we get that, we have to spend it because we're not producers. We're
thank
net
you.
consumers.
Thank you. I always say that
Yeah,
that spending power is false, because that's spending. That's money that you get from labor. That's not money
absolutely.
that you make from producing. Like you said, do you
Right,
produce cars? Do you produce wheat? Do
right,
you produce sugar?
right.
That's really where GDP comes from. GDP is
Absolutely.
anything that's produced in the country, not
Right.
spending. And
Absolutely.
so, and so when you're talking about, not only that in America, but also you got to factor in, and I've said this. Okay, so what about trade deals? Because you think you're going to build these companies. Most of these black billionaires are not doing trade in Africa
Right.
because you don't run the free trade agreements.
Hey, the
Hmm.
U.S. does. It's so many things that goes into economics than just buy black, start business, shop black. Like there's a
Yeah.
lot of political stuff that has to get in place. You have
Yep.
to know who are going to be your primary partners because if you're a black business and you want to work with Africa, if you don't have the political infrastructure and negotiations already set,
Hmm.
when you try to do stuff in Africa, you're going to find out real quick you can't do it because you're relying on US standards.
Right. And if the I guess the I when I look at Liberia, I think the people that stand to gain most from Liberia, well, the Black Americans that stand to gain most from a powerful, strong Liberia is the ones who are already, I guess, influential or powerful here. But at the same time, they're probably the least likely, the least, um, I guess you can say, are viable for convincing to take up Liberia as a cause. Um, because if you can, just like you said, as far as the trade deals, if you can if you can influence America to preference Liberia in trade, and then participate in that trade that you preference in Liberia, that level of wealth that you can create doing that is could be phenomenal. You know what I mean? Like, um, if you can convince the U.S. government to, because of the historical relationship that Liberia possesses with America, to have duty-free, I guess, imports of goods, or to allow, I guess, certain access to the U.S. market, or non-reciprocal access to the U.S. market that Liberia could have. I mean, then you participate in that. I don't know if that makes sense. That could be a huge windfall for the individuals who have the ability to make those, I guess, calls, or to like influence government in that way. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like if you can like say, I'll preference Liberian rice over other countries' rice production. America can do that, and decide to have that kind of trade relationship with Liberia in this particular category. And then if you invested in the rice industry in America, you would benefit from that. In Liberia, I'm sorry, you'd benefit from that, wouldn't you? Um, there's so many opportunities that you can have by being a part of a nation state, and negotiating from that perspective, that you could never attain by being just a minority underclass in America. You know what I mean? So that's an incentive there in and of itself. Um, yeah, there's so many ways to, I guess, there's so many benefits that you can get from, negotiating from the standpoint of Liberia as our country, as a nation that we're trying to develop. Even with corporations, and I've said this to you, Jabari, all the time. Like, as Black Americans here, um, as far as reaching out, like there's an idea that I have where, if you can gain, for instance, like a Nike, a lot of Nike's manufacturing takes place in Asia, right? And Asia's a lot farther from the U.S., from one of Nike's major, I guess, consumption points or selling points, and the European market, than Liberia is. Liberia is right in the middle between Europe and the U.S., and it's a lot closer than Thailand or China, for instance. So if Black Americans could get contracts with companies like Nike or other shoe companies to produce a certain amount of goods, for them, whether it be clothing or shoes or whatever, and then build factories in Liberia to produce those products, take advantage of I guess the affordable labor, take advantage of I guess the regulatory environment in Liberia, and then do those exports. That's a way that we could stimulate the economy in Liberia. You see what I'm saying? Like there's so many opportunities there, as far as, where we can, I guess, the Black American community can benefit, and the Liberian government, and the people of Liberia overall, the nation overall, could benefit, by our greater involvement. There's so many. there's so many strategies that we can roll out in order to, stimulate a stronger Liberia. Um, yeah.
You got a question, brother. He said, is being American equal to citizen of the US? If not, then blacks in the US need to not think of themselves as American. This ship needs to be made in order to move towards Pan-African uplift.
Yeah, when I referenced Black Americans, um, I'm referring to the Black people in America who are citizens of America. Um, but I mean, it would apply to black people all throughout this hemisphere. Um, Liberia's always been a safe haven for Black people all throughout this hemisphere, um, or the Western Hemisphere to be specific. Um, so yeah, that's what I mean by. But yeah, we should definitely see ourselves as connected to the continent. I know there's a movement where Black people are trying to disassociate themselves from Africa. I don't see the sense in that. And I really don't validate that train of thought. Um, but yeah, we should definitely identify with Africa, and Liberia is a beautiful way for us to do that. Um, we already have a history, a long legacy of interaction with that particular place. Um, so yeah, that's where the history, I guess, comes from a lot, where we can see ourselves in a place because we've technically already been there. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah,
And also, like I said, it's one of those things. I said, when you have a homeland, you feel there's a way out.
right.
Okay, when you don't have a nation of your own, what ends up happening is you feel there's no way out.
Hmm.
You feel like, okay, yeah, I would love to leave. I would love to leave, but I don't have, where am I supposed to go?
Right.
So that puts me in a situation where, okay, well, I want to go back to Africa, but where are we going to go? Because one of the things you'll hear over and over again whenever we talk about let's go back to the continent, people always say, well, where are we going to go? And Africans don't like us. And, well, okay, well, we do have a country, you just need to claim it. And if your
Mhm.
first thing is to go to that negative stereotype, like I said about the narrative, well, then you
Right.
feel that there's nowhere to go. So you feel like, let me just stay in America because I ain't got nowhere to go. And let's also apply that to um the citizenship case, right? People like African Americans should get citizenship in Africa with no strings attached. My
Yeah.
response has been, okay, well, what countries are going to give it to you? Because in order, you think countries that ain't got nothing to do with the slave trade are going to let you get citizenship in their country automatically? So, okay, let's say the Congo said, we're going to give African Americans automatic citizenship. The Congo. Well, if you don't speak, well, how you? Okay, you can move to the Congo, but you ain't speak French. So how exactly is that going to work out? Or let's say Ivory Coast said um, that um, yeah, Ivory Coast said you can have automatic citizenship. Okay, well, Ivory Coast speaks French, Benin speaks French, Togo speaks French. So what if they all say, yeah, you can come here and you don't know how to speak French?
Yeah. No. Anyone that that's looked at the situation even in a cursory manner clearly can see that Liberia is the most logical choice. The argument for that is so strong. Um, a lot of the times I'll hear discussion about Black Americans trying to find a homeland or find autonomy, like and they'll pick some of the most absurd places. I think I've listened to something where a Vice did a YouTube video where they touted Tulum as a possible homeland for Black Americans. I'm like, you would move from America where you're a minority, and you speak the language, to a city in Mexico where you'll be a minority and you don't speak the language. Why would you? That's like moving backwards. Why would you do that? Um, and I feel like it's a lot. I feel like it's due to people not understanding the history and just not having a proper education on, um, you know, you're right, exactly, like the history, not understanding, history, not understanding what we would need to be a thriving community. Um, so yeah, that's why I think educating people, that's half the battle. That's half the battle, educating people. The other half is showing them mobilizing them next to take the steps to actually lean in. And because just by the movement alone, um, just by Black Americans moving from where we are here with what we have here and transferring that to Liberia, that's a net, gain for the country in and of itself. Um, I think I've stated where if 100,000 Black Americans or Black people from this hemisphere move to Liberia with $50,000 in in assets, which isn't a great deal of money, you know what I mean, or isn't a great deal of possessions, but just to use 50,000 as a benchmark, that kind of movement of capital from one part of the world to the next would represent more than Liberia's entire GDP at the moment
Uh-huh.
being infused into the country. You see what I'm saying? That could jumpstart or really rev that economy in a way that it's hard for us to really imagine. It would be on a miracle level, on some Japanese restoration type situation. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um,
And the thing you got to factor in is purchasing power and parity. So
Absolutely. That's
what, for
a
those
fact.
who don't know what purchasing power parity is, purchasing power parity is basically you can talk about the dollar, but you have to adjust it according to other countries' currencies. So yes, while $50,000 may be $50,000 in the U.S., if Liberia, if the standard of living is double that, then
Yeah.
actually your 50,000 is not really 50,000, it's actually $100,000.
Right.
But you have to factor in the exchange rate of currencies. That's why when you do many African countries, like Nigeria, for example, its GDP is only $510 if you go strictly off of using the US dollar as the metrics. But if
Right.
you adjust it according to purchasing power parity, Nigeria's GDP is over $1 trillion.
Right.
It's the same thing if you were to compare GDPs of Nigeria and Egypt. Nigeria and Egypt, well, if you compare Nigeria, South Africa, and Egypt, Nigeria is number one, South Africa is number two, Egypt's number three, or it
Right.
might be Egypt number two, South Africa number three. I think it's probably that Egypt's number two. But if you adjust purchasing power parity, Egypt is number one because you have to adjust the currencies. So
Right.
yeah, it would be a lot more if we were in Liberia simply because you would have to
Right.
adjust to purchasing power parity.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing I tell people, like, just not even that's before we even get on the ground and start building stuff. Just us moving there and infusing that level of and having that capital transfer could be huge for the country's development. And then when we get there and we start building things, we start putting things into place, that is going to create its own economic synergy of its on its own, and you know that's going to stimulate the economy and give us an alternative. Um, yeah, I feel like if we can get the economy, like, it's half of it is education, and half of it for me is getting that economy to where it needs to be. um, I know the first thought a lot of Black Americans have, or people in general. I don't want to just pick on Black Americans, but the first thought people have when they consider Africa is a lot of the times it's associating it with poverty. You know what I mean? So if you can change that connotation and be like, no, actually, you can go out there and you can have a job and you can, work, have really good benefits. You can have certain social safety nets in place that's going to make sure that you're okay and that you're not going to, you know, you can have a good quality of life as a human being, and you can live in a world free from the racism that you experience here in America. I don't see what's going to be a bigger sell than that. For a lot of Black Americans. Um, so what am I going to? Or what am I moving towards? Um, that to me, I feel like, is a big question a lot of people have when they when I I guess pose the idea of Liberian returning. Um, the first thought to them is, what's there? Well, what will we do once we get there? And that's a question that we've got to answer, or have at least or at least try to answer as a part of our strategy. Um, yeah,
Mm. So Barusi has a question. He said concerning the uses of the term Black American. Let's see which one he said earlier. He said is Black American is a negative term that does not connotate nor mentally convey any connection to Africa. Do you agree? If so, how can we start thinking ourselves as African? I don't use the word Black American. I don't. I mean, I understand sometimes it's used interchangeably, but I don't use the term um, Black American simply because Blackness is a very vague concept
yeah,
because it doesn't denote where you're from. Because
mm,
I've always quoted that infamous I screenshot the infamous video, right? And it was talking about why the Chinese don't call themselves by that color.
yeah,
And you know what color I'm talking about. But
yeah,
and it's sort of the same way I sort of see with Black Americans, right? It's like that one comment. I'm still gonna bring it up. She's like, "Yeah, African Americans or Black Americans need to start calling themselves African or African American because it's like go to an airport and ask them to get a plane ticket to Black, and
mm,
you can't and they can't name it,
right,
and that's sort of how I see it. Give me a plane ticket to Black. Can I go to Black? Um and that would be your answer. But I can go to Africa where there's Africans. I can go to India where there's Indians. So I don't like the word strictly black. And
right,
also, let's also understand the connotation of what the word black means.
mm,
Hey, I understand that's a separate topic, but anything black is seen as negative.
negative, right,
Black dogs, black cats, black
right,
robots, black magic, everything that's black is seen as negative. For example,
yeah,
black cats are seen as bad luck.
look, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Black magic is seen as evil. Black dogs are
Don't be
more
adopted.
likely to not be adopted.
Right, right,
So you're using a term that has negative connotations, which I believe that blackness should be completely redefined. It needs to be changed. But just strictly basing it off of blackness and not understanding where that blackness is tied to, both historically and geographically, to me is a problem. When
no, for
somebody
sure,
calls you black, they are referring to you as an African.
right,
Because if you want to be real and you say I'm a black American, well, an Indian person can say, well, I'm black. I'm
right,
darker than you. Why
yeah,
am I not black?
right. No, yeah, like I completely agree with that. Um, I use it because in parlance and like in normal, I guess, well, in most encounters, that's the phrasing that I use. But I totally agree with that we should definitely see ourselves as African and move away from that word. I think part of returning to Liberia would help us do that if we were, once our children are born in Liberia and their children are over, they're not going to see themselves as black. They're going to see themselves as African or Liberian. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, I I'm I don't pay as much attention to syntax and language as I should. Um, but yeah, I wasn't saying it in a way to like I'm definitely see myself as an African, and I definitely think that we should identify with Africa. If I use black, it's purely like in a way to like speak to a specific thing, I guess. Um, but no, for sure, we should definitely identify as Africans and tie our future to Africa, and try to engage further with Africa. I definitely see um, Africa as our future as far as re-engaging with Liberia and so forth.
All right, so there's another question. The other question was, he said, well, this is for me, but you can also answer. Jabari, what is the reason why Sierra Leone and Liberia are not united, or are they?
Oh yeah,
Um,
They should definitely be one. In my opinion, they should be one country. We should have some form of political connection, whether it's going to be like on a federal basis or something like that. It's a glaring, it's something that's like it's definitely a glaring oddity that they haven't found a way to be closer connected as a political entity. But yeah, it should be one country, I think.
And I would say I would go it's simple political will. I mean, you
Mhm.
look at if you compare that to the East African Federation, where you now have the situation you got Kenya, Tanzania, South Sudan, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and the Democratic Republic of Congo all
Mhm.
merging to form like this East African Union.
Yeah,
That takes political will.
yeah,
Liberia and Sierra Leone could easily emerge, just like Ivory Coast and Guinea could easily emerge. There's a organization, and I'm about to show it real quick. I'm about to share my screen real quick. But there is a organization called the Mono River Union
yeah.
that brings together the Ivory Coast. It brings together Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Guinea, and it was supposed to serve as this thing to encourage integration. So this is the Mono River Union. Hold on, let me look it up. So this right here is the Mono River Union. So this is the Mono River Union. It comprises, you see, Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Ivory Coast, and yet the four of them haven't come together. Liberia, Sierra Leone haven't came together, and it's all due to political will. If
Right,
they wanted to, the Mono River Union could say tomorrow, "Hey, yo, we all integrating everything together. All we're going to be all become part of one university system. We're going to be absorbed into one country. We're going to, hold on, give me a second. Hold on, give me a second. We want to, um, hold on, hold on.
while we're waiting for him to come back, yeah, a lot of the
I'm back.
go
I'm
ahead.
back. I'm back. I just had to I had to charge to get my phone and the my laptop in the charger. But yeah, you have a situation where if they wanted to right now, all four of these countries could get together and say, "Yo, we all gonna become one country. We're all
Mhm.
gonna work together. We're gonna integrate all of our university systems. We're gonna integrate all of our roads and
Mhm.
bridges. We're gonna integrate everything, and we're just gonna become one country." And that hasn't happened because it's political will. It all
Right,
comes down to political will. If
right,
Sierra Leone and Liberia wanted to become one country, they could. If Liberia, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Ivory Coast wanted to become one country, they can. They just don't want to.
mhm, right. Or and another thing too, like I feel like it's their leadership. A lot of these countries, even if you look at the African Union and how it's set up and compared to the European Union, um it's definitely different. It's more of a club of the leaders of Africa, as opposed to the European Union has its own separate government that's not the presidents of each particular country in Europe, because they want to actually, because they understand that each country has separate interest, but they want to merge those interests. That's their ultimate goal. And I feel like some of these countries, especially in West Africa and so forth, um, their leaders are much more willing to be um, a big fish in a small pond rather than a small fish in a large pond, if that makes sense. They'd rather
Mhm.
be they'd rather be a chief in their small area of the world rather than having their authority diluted in a larger um, collective. I think that's a big reason why a lot of countries in Africa don't just consolidate, because it makes perfect sense that Sierra Leone and Liberia, they have similar histories, they have the same language as their national language or their language that they speak in government. Um, they're right next to each other. They have similar resources. They have similar rainfall. That's how close these countries are. Their civil wars spill over into each other. Their conflicts spill over into each other. That's how connected these two nations are. Yet, they exist as two separate entities rather than pooling resources together. Um, I think we could, and that's another opportunity I see for the Africans that exist in the Western Hemisphere, is that we can be that glue that ties Africa closer together if we wanted to. That's another I guess question of our will, is that we can go there and be that glue. We don't have the same level. We don't have the same, I guess, legacy issues that would stop mergers of certain areas. We don't have that. As far as there's certain, I would say, considerations based on history and so forth that we don't per se share. um, we can come in and really glue a lot of these places and harmonize a lot of what's going on. Even infrastructure wise, uh, the continent isn't harmonized, to really account for that closeness that could exist or should exist. Um, so yeah, that's
Mhm. Yeah, it's always been my belief that all four of those countries should be one nation.
yeah,
Ivory Coast, Guinea, Sierra Leone. Like, I don't understand why they're not one country. It would just be better.
yeah,
Um, but like I said, it all comes down to political will. If you have the political will, you'll find the way. If
yeah,
you don't, and that was the whole purpose of the Mono River Union. The purpose of the Mono River Union was to encourage regional integration, cooperation. Now, I understand that people, you can have like a European Union. The European Union right now is currently unraveling, and the reason why is because of the fact that you have a union that isn't federated, that isn't central. I
right,
mean, look at what's going. If one union state disagrees, the union can't do anything. And then you're in a situation where, okay, well, if one country doesn't want that, they can hold up the other countries. Because remember, this is a union. Everybody has to agree on it. If this was a federative state, yeah, you may have lost sovereignty, each of your countries, but we're able to do stuff more efficiently and project more because there's one central government. If Ivory Coast and Guinea say, or let's say Sierra Leone doesn't want to do it, but let's say Ivory Coast and Guinea say, yeah, man, let's merge into one country. Yeah, we agree. And Sierra Leone says, no, I'm good. Thank you. Well, I mean, Sierra Leone holds up everything now because we're all united and we got this one small area that doesn't want to be absorbed in or doesn't want to come together because, well, they don't want to do it because they want to focus on themselves rather than the interest of the group. Now, I'm not saying Sierra Leone would do that, but I'm just saying hypothetically, this is what we're getting into. When you have sort of a confederation, it implies that everybody agrees on it. And I don't believe you have a union that it should be loosely confederated. I don't want this Articles of Confederation nonsense.
right, right,
That's
right,
always been me. I don't like this Articles of Confederation nonsense where it gotta be like, well, everybody has to agree on it. And I believe if we're gonna become a union, Sierra Leone, Guinea, Ivory Coast, Liberia all need to cease to exist. They're one nation. They have one central government. They have one flag. They have one constitution. They have the same laws. They drive on the same road. Um, they speak their local languages. We get rid of English and French, or we adopt another language that's probably outside that or maybe Swahili. But yeah, it needs to be a centralized government and not just loosely confederated nations that we all have just similar goals, but at any given time they can back it up and they can back out and then hold us up.
right. Yeah,
Because it would be dope. It would be dope to see all four of those countries emerge into one country. Because let's not forget, I've always said this. Let's not forget, some parts of Liberia were part of Guinea were part of
yeah,
Liberia until it was taken by France. A lot of what the Ivory Coast used to be part of, um, was given to them by France.
right. Yeah, there was definitely that encroachment. Yep. Yeah, it's yeah, and that's another leadership position Liberia can take as far as whether it be using soft power or using economic power to really bind those places together, not unlike um, Germany's position in the EU. You know, you just Germany's economy binds a lot of uh, I guess the minor states in Europe together. If in
Yeah,
Liberia,
because if we do 100,000, I'm just gonna we gonna if we do 100,000 and we have we're just gonna say strictly just 50,000. We're just gonna do 50,000 just for the sake of it, right?
yep,
So if we do 100,000 and 50,000, well, that's about close to, let's see.
that's
So in
five
that
billion.
situ, yeah, that's 5 billion. That's about 5 billion,
That's
I think.
double that's double the economy.
Right,
$5 billion pumped into the
right,
economy.
right.
Yeah,
That's 100,000, and we're doing just strictly 100,000.
it's just
We're
a
not
hundred
even
thousand.
including, right? We're not even including the fact that a million of us might show up because last time for Ghana's year of
Yeah.
return, a million people showed up.
Yep.
So if you have that and you got a million people show up, you have a
Ridiculous.
situation now where you have 50 billion.
Right.
So that's about the same as Ivory Coast.
Yeah.
So you now have more influence. So
Yeah.
that's what we're saying. You
Absolutely.
you have to come from that position of power,
Yeah.
because once you have the economic leverage, you can start, like you said, connecting everything. You connect all the roads so that all the roads connect to Liberia. You connect all the ports so all the ports are on one accord. You connect all the university systems so the university systems in Guinea, Ivory Coast, Liberia, and Sierra Leone are all the same. And so all that increases your power, but also it gives the desire to want unification. I also believe Burkina Faso and Mali should be annexed too as well, because they don't like France, and I like that because that we could create a political union with them too, and of course they eventually being too, um, but yeah, that's really my whole sting onto it.
No, ultimately, all of ECOWAS is going to become one country and probably beyond. If we follow a trajectory, if we go ahead and do the work that we need to do, but that 5 billion we named, Jabari, that's just from moving. That's just the money that they would deposit into bank accounts on day one. That's not building. That's not what they go and they create once they get there with that wealth. You know, um, like you said, with the connecting all the roads. If, for instance, Guinea realizes that the main consumer of their cotton, for instance, is in Liberia, the differences between those two countries are going to be less pronounced. You see what I'm saying? When I find that the primary consumer of the goods that I make here are in another country, then you know what I mean. It gives people, it makes people feel a lot more closer to each other or more connected. Like my interests are not just my interest. I need to make sure that my primary consumer is taken care of as well, because that's where my wealth comes from. You see what I'm saying? If I don't I don't know. Yeah, yeah. Like if you can work in, for instance, a part of Guinea and live in Liberia. You see what I'm saying? Like because we have high speed rail and so forth, and we can connect each other a lot quicker. That to me, that's what's going to see these national boundaries really, disappear over time. I think that's what the situation is for East Africa, is that they have that infrastructure already in place to where the movement and the freedom of movement of goods and people, it makes more sense for their economy because they're already so interdependent to begin with. If Rwanda's a landlocked country, if it wants to export goods, it has to go through a Tanzanian port or it has to go through a Kenyan port. Same thing for Malawi, or Uganda. I'm sorry. it has to go through either a South Sudan port or does South Sudan have ports? Or it has to go through. More than likely, it's going to go through a Kenyan or a Tanzanian port. So those countries are dependent on each other. It doesn't make sense for them to not consider their neighbor's interest and not try to closer unify themselves with their neighbor, because their neighbor's economy is technically a part of their economy. So yeah, it makes perfect sense that once we have that closer connections, those countries have those closer connections, then you'll start to see those divisions really disappear over time.
Yes. So for me, I'm more of educating. I'm doing more with the education, like starting education initiatives,
Yeah.
doing initiatives in the community. Um, we could fund, but the thing about if we're gonna fund, we have to be specific in demands that we want. Like they can agree with the principles of land infrastructure nation, but we got to be specific on what we want. Like, yeah, we willing to support you financially. We're willing to donate to your campaign, but in exchange, we want citizenship. We want access to land. We want easy visa admission. I should not be having to do all this stuff to get into Liberia. We want to have these many seats in the Liberian parliament so that the people in the diaspora can have more of a say. You have to start having actual demands, because now we got to start asking these politicians, what do we want it to look like? If they were to tell you right now, just give me a plan that I can implement, what would that plan look like? So I understand more funding, but it's gotta have to start with education, because they have to know how it works, and then they have to know what we want.
And even from our group, like if one of us wants to go ahead and run for a place in Congress in Liberia, we should definitely back that individual, you know, so that we can have one of our people in there advocating based on our particular worldview, how our vision of what Liberia could be in the future. Definitely, like if we know of someone who has political aspirations and is not sure where they want to end up, encouraging them to try to, I guess, run for office in Liberia, we should definitely support that 100%. You know,
Yeah, I'm 100% down. It's just making sure that you have the policies and you know what you want. Once you know
right?
what you want, you can eat. Then it becomes easy, because if they don't give you what you want, you can move on to the next person. If you don't know what you want, that's when
Right.
it becomes the issue.
Yeah, I mean, I'm speaking with regards to someone from the BAIO. Like, if one of us wanted to run, like, we should be like that. That should be someone that's already, fully, I guess, oriented in what we would need as a people on this side, and try to get those initiatives taken up once they get a position of power in the Liberian Congress.
Now,
That's
what are the
definitely something we
counties where
should
you would
organize.
now? What are the counties you would choose though? I'll ask you those questions. Explain
I,
that.
I like the coastal. I think the we should really prioritize the coast
Yes,
for
ma'am.
for logical reasons. Um, and I think about that all the time. I'm like, yeah, that's a really good question that you asked, but I definitely think we should prioritize the coastal counties first. Or at least from our initiatives, it should really focus on the coastal counties. Let me see. Like I personally I want to focus on Grand Cape Mount. Like if I get some startup cash or I get some startup financing, I'd want to build something there. As far as manufacturing is concerned, Maryland is a awesome county for us to focus on. Um, Margibi That's a decent one. Montserrado, obviously for obvious reasons. Um, yeah, the coastal counties should definitely be our focus. As far as getting a foothold, because then we can expand from there. Um, so yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
You say coastal. You say coastal. So you're talking about Grand Cape Mount. Is that what you're talking about, or are you
Yeah,
talking?
Grand Cape Mount, Tubmanburg, um, let's see, Buchanan,
Yeah,
uh, um, Greenville, let me see,
Barclayville.
Barclayville, yep,
Yep.
um, Riversess,
Yep. In
yeah,
Maryland.
yeah, yep, and yeah, those are the counties I think we should Harper. Those are the counties we should really like concentrate on. Um,
Yeah, I
yeah,
do agree. I believe Nimba should serve like as the gateway because Nimba is between Ivory Coast and Guinea. So I would say that Nimba should serve more of like the gateway into Ivory Coast and Sierra Leone.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I definitely agree. I would say we need to focus more. I would say on Grand Cape Mount,
yep,
Sinai, and especially Sinai, and then I would say River Sets. The only reason why I say that is because I care about population density. And
right.
so an example would be in the case of Liberian County, Sinai is like what, like the second least densely populated county
Mhm.
in Liberia. So that's what I think of. I'm thinking about counties that are not densely
Mm,
populated
okay.
because Montserrado County is a no-go. Montserrado County, you're talking about Monrovia. Montserrado County is a no-go.
Yeah, yeah,
For,
yeah.
for
No, I think that should be our last. That should be the last. Once we've knocked out these other places, that should be the last, push. But initially, no, you're totally right. I totally see your vision on that. Um, no, I totally agree with you. We should definitely concentrate on the ones that have the least population because then we can we can become the dominant demographic really quickly. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So it's like we should definitely start from there. It looks like River Cess has let me see. Wait,
'Cause I
which
know,
one did you say? Which one did you say? Did you say it was Sino?
yes, yeah, Sinai, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because there's only 100,000 people there.
And
Um
9,000, yeah, I'm about to say that's what it says. Sino, or I don't know. I say Sino. Somebody told me it was
I don't
Sino,
know.
so I
Yeah,
pronounce
yeah,
Sino. So for me, it's Sino on the coastal. Now, a lot of the
yeah.
interior, like Grand Jita, would be an example of somewhere. Grand Jita is the least densely populated. So
Okay, yeah.
Sinai and Grand Jita are the least densely populated, and
Uh-huh.
um, then we could say,
Grand Cru is
yeah, oh
there's
yeah,
only
Grand
there's
Crew.
only 50,000 people in that county.
Yeah, Grand Crew is definitely least densely populated. Oh yes, it is
Right.
definitely. So yeah, I would focus on the areas that are least densely populated because you can
And
get more
work on.
people. You can get
Right.
more people in
Right, right, right.
in
Absolutely.
in those areas. Your Grand Crew is the least populated, and then Grand Jita I think is the third least densely populated.
Uh-huh.
And then I know Sino is I think second or third. I gotta make sure. But I know for a fact Grand Crew is the least densely populated. So knowing that, it gives us much of an advantage to set up in those
Yeah.
areas that
Yeah.
it's not. Yeah, it's the second least.
Yeah.
Um, yes.
Cause
So
think about it, just like we said, let's go back to our 100,000 example. If we could get 100,000 people in Grand Cru, that we will control that county. Um, uh, yeah, like no. This is how we plan. This is how we should definitely plan. We should definitely stack them based on from
because
high
if you're,
priority to
yeah, I'm
low
about to
to low
say, because
from a high.
if you
Mhm.
want to get more people in, if we want to bring, because of course we're gonna have a lot of African Americans flooding in, but you
Right,
don't want them to flood in a place like Monrovia or
right,
Montserrado when there's already a million people and
right, because that won't matter.
yeah,
Right,
urban population is bad, it's off the charts.
right,
urban sprawls all over the place. I mean, you
Right.
go to Monrovia, it, it,
I've seen videos of it, and it looks very daunting. That's not where we want to
yeah,
start.
it's like urban sprawl. Like there's nothing connect. Like there's no
Oh,
urban plant. Like
yeah,
urban sprawls all over the place.
right,
Whereas place like Grand Cru, where
right.
it's the least populous county, and then Grand Jita is the least densely populated, or I wouldn't say the least densely. I would no, it's actually Barpaloo. Barpaloo is the least densely populated county, and then it would be Sino, and then I would say Grand Cru as being the least densely populated. I mean, Grand Jita being the least populated. It would be
Mhm.
better for us to work there because you can influx more African Americans and you can
Right,
build more on those
right.
areas because there's nothing there or
There's
there's not a
nothing
lot of
there.
people there.
No, no, no. No, I'm totally with you. I totally see the vision with that, and I'm 100% behind it. That makes perfect sense. Every one person returning would make more impact in Grand Cru than they could ever make in, Montreal. So yeah, that's definitely a plan, man. Like,
And then once
I'm
we do,
100%.
and it is once we do Liberia, then we can head to Sierra Leone.
Yo, for sure,
Like that's
absolutely,
I'll always say you start with Liberia first, and then go to Sierra Leone because
absolutely,
I mean, yes, we have a close connection to Sierra Leone, but the only reason why we have a strong connection with Sierra Leone is because of Freetown. Freetown
yep,
is like the area that we established. The other
right,
areas in the interior are are more like closer to Guinea in terms of like you know our
culturally,
overall yeah, culturally.
right,
So, you know, except for maybe Freetown where the Creole population is dominant there,
uh,
most of the other parts of Sierra Leone, I would say, are more culturally aligned with Guinea, simply because obviously, like I said, it's called Freetown for a reason.
right,
Freetown, that by free slaves.
right,
But Liberia would
yeah,
be central because like every part of Liberia has some sort of connection.
right,
There's an Alabama camp in Lofa County. There's
right.
a place called Alabama Camp in Lofa County.
Mm.
There's a place called Harrisburg in where's I know there's a place in Harrisburg. There's a place in Harrisburg called in Liberia around Cartertown. Um so yeah.
No, that's a
So
plan, bro. That's a plan.
yeah, so that's our goal. Focus on the least densely populated areas because they need the development too. Because I mean, if you look at the Human Development Index, it's bad.
Yeah. Oh no, for sure. No, for sure. That's what we would tackle. We'd want to immediately get on the ground and start putting things in position to where um that those areas can start to thrive. Um yeah, I definitely 100% agree. Go to places where the least activity so that we can have a blank slate to where we can start drawing from. I used to look at Robertsport as a possible second city, but now that you brought that up, I think it's Barclaysville. Like we should definitely focus in there, because it is in Grants, sorry,
In
in
Grand
Grand
Crew.
Crew,
Yeah,
and
and in Maryland, obviously, if you're from the
right
state of
up the block.
Maryland, you
Yeah,
should it would more to be into because there's another Maryland. I did not know that it was
yeah,
the Republic of Maryland.
right, and it's right there as well. And those two look like they're two pieces of the same puzzle that we could have spillover with regards to that. Um, but nah, for sure, like I'm with it. Like my goal, and I and this it, I would say that initially my goal was to go there and have some form of like agricultural type enterprise. Um, I'm already like investing in real estate here to where I could like have rental income. And my goal was to have rental income from here, repatriate that money to Liberia, um, to where the dollar cost. Ooh, you just said it. I forgot the name. What is it called? The purchasing power parity. You have that, and you can build enterprises there to generate income there. Um, so my goal was to go there and build some kind of like a farm or something. But now that I think about it, probably what we would need to do as returnees is to try to build manufacturing, hit the manufacturing industry, because that's going to create a lot of jobs. It's in a sectors that local Liberians probably can't access that well because just because of what their primary challenges are, I guess. Um, so yeah, I would want to go out there and create a factory out there to where we could purchase the raw materials that are already being produced on the ground and make it into a finished good that we can export or use in further industrialization of the country. Um, and if we're going to concentrate on Barclaysville, um, that could be a goal.
Alrighty. He basically summed it up. We're gonna end it right now because obviously we have more things we have to attend. You'll be there in a couple of minutes as well. I'll send you out the invitation and you should get it. So we're gonna have to end here, unfortunately. Because like I said, we have something else you have to do. Make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Make sure you tune into the lounge. We have the lounge every Sunday at 8:30, 9 o'clock. So be there. We have a lot of interesting topics, a lot of interesting discussions. It's where we are able to be free. So once again, make sure you sign up to the website at baioafricstan.org/register. Please do not sign up to the Ning site. We do not own the Ning site. It needs to be made clear. I don't know that happened to brother. So we don't want y'all to make that same mistake. Make sure you sign up to this link.
Awesome.
And with that, brother, thank you so much for being on. He's an expert on Liberia, like I do. Rep from the state of Virginia. If you are in Virginia, let us know so you can connect with him. So yeah, that is it. So with that, I will say thank you so much for being on.
Thank you very
Of
much.
course, like I said, sign up to the website. And you guys have a great rest of the day.
All right, you too. Take care, man.
Peace. I'll see you later in like a few minutes.